Sí,
I was standing outside my parents' house, my hand pressed against my cheek, where the sting of my father's palm still burned like fire. For 28 years, I had done everything for this family. I had sacrificed my savings, my time, my energy. I was secretly paying for my sister's entire wedding, nearly $30,000 from my own pocket. And yet, my father had just slapped me across the face because I asked for 5 minutes before parking my sister's car. What could possibly push a loving son to walk away forever? Before I share how one slap changed the course of my entire life, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you believe that family should treat each other with love and respect, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where this painful journey began. And trust me, you will not believe what happened next. My name is Horace, and I grew up in a modest house in the suburbs of Ohio. We were a middle-class family, nothing fancy, but we always had food on the table and a roof over our heads. My father, Gerald, was 58 years old at the time of this story. He had worked as a plumber for most of his life until chronic back pain forced him into early retirement about 3 years ago. He was the old-fashioned type, stubborn as a mule, and believed that his word was law in our household. My mother, Doris, was 55. She worked part-time at the local library, a gentle woman who loved books more than confrontation. She had a kind heart, but she had spent her entire marriage standing behind my father, never questioning his decisions, never challenging his authority. Then, there was my younger sister, Brenda. She was 25, the baby of the family, and she had been treated like a princess since the day she was born. Brenda was engaged to a man named Derek, a loan officer at a regional bank. They had been together for about 2 years, and their wedding was scheduled for that coming Saturday. I was 28, working as a software engineer at a tech company about 45 minutes from my parents' house. I lived alone in a small apartment, which I had rented since graduating from college. Growing up, the difference in how my parents treated Brenda and me was impossible to ignore. When we were kids, Brenda always got the nicer toys, the prettier clothes, the bigger birthday parties. When it came time for college, my parents paid for her entire tuition at a private university without blinking an eye. For me, they contributed maybe a quarter of what I needed, and I had to work 2 part-time jobs while studying full-time to cover the rest. I started working at a grocery store when I was 16, bagging groceries and stocking shelves until midnight on school nights. I never complained. I told myself that was just how things were, that being the older brother meant shouldering more responsibility. I loved Brenda despite everything. When we were younger, I used to walk her to school every morning and pick her up every afternoon. I defended her against bullies. I helped her with her homework. I genuinely wanted the best for her. 8 months before the incident that changed everything, Brenda got engaged to Derek. She wanted a big wedding, the kind you see in magazines, with 150 guests, a reception at a fancy venue, a designer wedding dress, fresh flowers everywhere, a live band, and a vintage car to drive them away at the end of the night. My parents promised they would take care of everything. They wanted to give their little girl the wedding of her dreams. But about a month before the wedding, I received a phone call from my mother late one evening. She was crying so hard, I could barely understand what she was saying. When she finally calmed down, she explained the situation. My father's retirement savings had taken a hit from some bad investments. Her part-time salary at the library was barely enough to cover their monthly bills. They had already put down deposits on the venue and several vendors, but they did not have enough money to pay the remaining balances. The wedding was going to be canceled unless they could come up with nearly $30,000 in the next few weeks. I did not hesitate. I told my mother I would take care of it. Over the next few days, I contacted the venue, the florist, the caterer, the band, the dress shop, and every other vendor involved in the wedding. I paid off everything. The venue alone cost $15,000. The designer wedding dress was another $4,000. The flowers, the music, the vintage car rental, the photographer, the cake, it all added up to just under $30,000. I used every penny of the savings I had accumulated over 5 years of working. When that was not enough, I took out a small personal loan to cover the difference. I asked my mother for only one thing in return. I asked her to keep it a secret. I did not want Brenda to feel guilty or obligated to me. I did not want my father to feel emasculated or ashamed that his son had to bail out the family. I just wanted my sister to have her dream wedding, and I wanted to do something meaningful for the people I loved. My mother hugged me through the phone, her voice trembling, as she told me she was proud of me, that I was the best son any mother could ask for. She promised she would never tell a soul. In my heart, I believed that this sacrifice would bring our family closer together. I imagined that after the wedding, things would be different. Maybe my father would finally see me as an equal, as a man worthy of respect, rather than just the kid who was always in the way. Maybe we would have family dinners where everyone laughed and shared stories. Maybe my mother would finally stand up for me when my father was being unreasonable. I held on to these hopes like a drowning man holds on to a piece of driftwood. I had no idea that everything was about to come crashing down because of something as simple as parking a car. It was a Thursday afternoon, exactly 2 days before the wedding. I had just finished a major project at work, one that had kept me at the office until nearly midnight for the past 2 weeks. I was exhausted running on coffee and determination, but I drove straight to my parents' house after work because I wanted to help with the final preparations. When I arrived, the house was buzzing with activity. My mother was in the kitchen preparing food for the rehearsal dinner the following night. My father was sitting in his usual spot in the living room watching a football game on television. Brenda and Derek were at the dining table going over the seating chart and making last-minute changes to the guest list. I walked into the kitchen and immediately started helping my mother. She handed me a heavy box filled with dishes and serving platters that needed to be moved to the dining room. I was carrying this box, my arms straining under the weight, when Brenda suddenly appeared in the doorway. She told me that she had parked her car in the wrong spot, and it was blocking the neighbor's driveway. She needed someone to move it, and apparently that someone was me. I looked at her, my arms still wrapped around this heavy box, and I said something that I thought was perfectly reasonable. I asked her to give me 5 minutes so I could set the box down first. You would have thought I had insulted her ancestors. Brenda's face twisted into an expression of pure indignation. She crossed her arms and told me that I was always like this, that I never helped her with anything, that I was the most selfish person she had ever known. I stood there genuinely confused. I had just spent $30,000 to save her wedding, and she was accusing me of never helping her because I asked for 5 minutes to put down a box. I tried to stay calm. I told her I was not refusing to help. I just needed a moment. But she had already stormed off toward the living room. The next thing I heard was Brenda's voice, high-pitched and whiny, complaining to our father about how I had refused to help her. I set the box down on the kitchen counter and walked into the living room, hoping to explain the misunderstanding. My father was already on his feet, his face red with anger. He did not ask me what happened. He did not give me a chance to explain. He just started yelling. He asked me why I could never just help my sister. He said everything always had to be about me. He called me selfish, ungrateful, and a disappointment. I tried to speak, tried to tell him that I had only asked for 5 minutes, but he was not interested in hearing my side. My mother had followed me into the living room, but she just stood there silently, her eyes fixed on the floor. Derek was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, a smirk on his face like he was enjoying the show. Something inside me finally snapped. After years of being overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted, I found my voice. I looked my father in the eyes and told him that I had done everything for this family. I reminded him that I had worked 2 jobs through college while they paid for Brenda's entire education. I told him that I had always been there whenever they needed help, and all I had asked for was 5 minutes. My father's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He took a step toward me and asked if I thought I was better than them, if I thought I was some big shot because I had a fancy job and a college degree. Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, his hand swung through the air and connected with my face. The slap echoed through the living room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. My cheek exploded with pain. My ear started ringing. For a moment, I could not hear anything except a high-pitched whine inside my own skull. When my vision cleared, I saw my father pointing toward the front door. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. He told me to get out of his house. He said I was not welcome at the wedding. He said he did not want to see my face again. I looked around the room. Brenda was standing behind our father, her arms still crossed, her expression unchanged. My mother was still staring at the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she did not say a word in my defense. Derek had turned away suddenly, very interested in something on his phone. I looked back at my father. I searched his eyes for some sign of regret, some flicker of recognition that he had gone too far. There was nothing, just cold, unwavering certainty that he was right and I was wrong. So I turned around and walked out the door. I stood on the front porch for what felt like an eternity. The evening air was cool against my burning cheek. I could hear muffled voices inside the house, but I could not make out what they were saying. My hand trembled as I reached up to touch my face. The skin was hot and tender, where my father's palm had struck. In that moment, standing alone on the porch of the house where I grew up, everything became crystal clear. I thought about the $30,000 I had spent. I thought about the 5 years of savings that had disappeared in a matter of weeks. I thought about the late nights and early mornings, the overtime shifts, and the side projects, all the sacrifices I had made to build that nest egg. And I thought about how my family had just thrown me away, like a piece of garbage, over a misunderstanding about parking a car. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for the wedding venue. A woman answered on the third ring. I introduced myself as the person who had paid for the reservation under my credit card. I told her I needed to cancel the entire booking. She asked if I was sure, reminded me that the wedding was only 2 days away. I told her I was absolutely certain. She said the cancellation would be processed immediately, and the refund would appear on my card within 5 to 7 business days. I ended that call and immediately made another one, this time to the dress shop. I explained that I was the one who had paid for the custom wedding dress and I needed to cancel the order. The woman on the phone was confused at first, but when I provided the receipt number and the last 4 digits of my credit card, she confirmed that yes, I was indeed the one who had paid. She processed the cancellation and told me the refund would be issued shortly. One by one, I called every vendor associated with the wedding: the florist, the catering company, the live band, the vintage car rental service, the photographer, the baker who was making the 4-tier wedding cake, every single one of them. With each phone call, I said the same thing. I am the one who paid for this. I have the receipts. I need to cancel everything immediately. And with each cancellation, I felt something strange happening inside my chest. The weight that had been pressing down on me for years, the constant need to prove myself, to earn my family's love, to be good enough, it started to lift. By the time I finished the last call, I felt lighter than I had in as long as I could remember. I was not doing this out of revenge. I was not trying to hurt Brenda or ruin her wedding. I was simply reclaiming my dignity. I was finally putting my own value above the people who had never valued me at all. Before I drove away, I composed a long text message to my mother. I told her everything. I explained that I had canceled all the arrangements I had paid for. I told her that I was not doing this because of the money, but because of the way I had been treated. I reminded her that she had watched my father slap me across the face and throw me out of the house, and she had said nothing. I told her that I loved her, but I could not continue to be part of a family that treated me like I was worthless. I said I would not be attending the wedding, and I would not be in contact for a while. I needed time to heal. I pressed send, turned off my phone, and drove back to my apartment in silence. That evening, the chaos unfolded at my parents' house. My mother, realizing the gravity of the situation, finally had to tell the truth. She confessed to my father and Brenda that I had been the one paying for the entire wedding. She explained that I had spent nearly $30,000 from my own savings to make sure Brenda could have her dream day. My father was stunned. For once in his life, he had nothing to say. He had just slapped and disowned the son who had sacrificed everything for the family. Brenda went into a complete panic. Her wedding was 2 days away, and suddenly there was no venue, no flowers, no food, no music, no dress. She tried calling me over and over, but my phone was off. Derek was furious. He blamed Brenda's family for the disaster, and I later heard they had a massive argument that night. My mother cried herself to sleep. My father sat alone in the dark living room until the early hours of the morning, unable to process what he had done. The days following my departure were some of the hardest of my life. I did not leave my apartment for nearly a week. I called in sick to work. I barely ate. I spent most of my time lying on my couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over in my mind. The physical pain from the slap faded within a few days, but the emotional wound was much deeper. It was not about the money. I could earn that back eventually. What hurt the most was the death of a hope I had carried my entire life. The hope that if I just tried hard enough, if I just gave enough, my family would finally love me the way I loved them. I questioned myself constantly during those dark days. Had I done the right thing? Was I being too harsh? Should I have just swallowed my pride and moved on like I always had before? But every time I started to doubt myself, I remembered the look in my father's eyes when he slapped me. I remembered my mother's silence. I remembered Brenda's face, completely unmoved by what had just happened to her brother. And I knew that I had made the only choice I could live with. I did not regret loving my family. I did not regret wanting to help them. I only regretted that it took me 28 years to realize that I deserved to be loved in return. Brenda's wedding still happened that Saturday, but it was nothing like what she had planned. Instead of 150 guests at an elegant venue, there were about 30 people gathered in my parents' backyard. Instead of a designer dress, Brenda wore a simple white sundress that my mother had bought at the last minute from a department store. There was no live band, no vintage car, no four-tier cake. Just some folding chairs, a portable speaker playing music from someone's phone, and a potluck dinner prepared by relatives. My mother called me the morning of the wedding. She begged me to come, said it was not too late, said everyone wanted me there. I told her I was sorry, but I could not. I wished Brenda and Derek a happy marriage, and I meant it sincerely. But I was not ready to pretend that everything was fine when it was not. A few days after the wedding, Brenda sent me a text message. It was an apology of sorts. She said she was sorry for how things had turned out, and that she wished I had been there. But reading between the lines, I could tell she was more upset about her ruined wedding than about how I had been treated. There was no acknowledgement of the years of inequality, no recognition of what I had sacrificed. It was the kind of apology you give when you want something to go away, not when you genuinely understand what you did wrong. I read the message. I did not reply. 6 months passed. During that time, I threw myself into my work. I took on extra projects, volunteered for difficult assignments, and impressed my supervisors with my dedication. 3 months after the incident, I received a promotion and a significant raise. I also started seeing a therapist, something I should have done years ago. We talked about my childhood, about the patterns of favoritism in my family, about my tendency to seek love through sacrifice and service. It was painful work, digging into those old wounds, but it was also liberating. I started building a new life for myself. I made friends with some colleagues at work who actually appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I started exercising regularly, cooking healthy meals, reading books I had always wanted to read. For the first time in my life, I was learning to take care of myself instead of constantly taking care of everyone else. One evening, about 6 months after I had walked out of my parents' house, I found an envelope in my mailbox. There was no return address, but I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long. It was the first time my father had ever written me a letter in his entire life. He apologized for slapping me. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had let his pride and his temper get the better of him. He said that learning about the money I had spent on the wedding had forced him to confront some hard truths about himself and how he had treated me over the years. He wrote that he missed me, that the house felt empty without me, that he thought about me every day. I sat in my apartment and read that letter 3 times. By the end, tears were streaming down my face. I did not rush to forgive him. Forgiveness is not something you can force, and the wounds were still too fresh. But I did write him a letter back. I told him that I appreciated his apology and that it meant more to me than he could know. I told him that I was not ready to come back yet, that I needed more time to heal. But I also told him that I was open to rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, on the condition that things would be different going forward. I did not need him to pay me back for the wedding. I did not need grand gestures or extravagant apologies. I just needed to be treated with basic respect and dignity. That was all I had ever wanted. Looking back on everything that happened, I learned something that I wish I had understood much sooner. Loving your family is a beautiful thing. Sacrificing for the people you care about can be noble and meaningful, but you should never sacrifice yourself to the point where you lose your own sense of worth. You should never give so much that you have nothing left for yourself. And you should never accept treatment that makes you feel small, invisible, or unimportant. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. Sometimes removing yourself from a toxic situation is the only way to make people understand how much you mattered all along. And sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who need to lose you before they can appreciate what they had. I do not know if my family will ever truly change. My father's letter was a good start, but words are easy. Actions take time. What I do know is this: I will never again allow anyone to make me feel worthless in my own home. I will never again sacrifice my dignity for the sake of keeping peace. And I will never again confuse being used with being loved. That lesson cost me $30,000 and 28 years of my life. But honestly, it was worth every penny and every moment. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you gave everything to someone who did not appreciate you? Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your own peace of mind? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. If you want to see more stories like this, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, share this video with them. Sometimes, one story can change a person's entire perspective. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. I hope you always have people in your life who love you the way you deserve to be loved. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.